Alright, this video is probably going to be a fairly long video, so I'll try to re-listen to it and put some little markers in it, but I feel like people should listen to the whole thing and not just pieces of it, because if you don't, it doesn't make as much sense. I'll leave a bunch of links in the description. You need to go, well, you don't need to go watch them, but if you want to know a little bit more in depth of what I'm talking about, I have previous videos, and this is kind of a follow-up to what is going on. So, if you've been following what I'm saying, I was talking about the Super Bowl a whole lot and how there's something odd about my uncle who just died by the numbers, and he gave me a Dan Marino jersey sometime this fall. And I don't know the exact day, but he gave me this Dan Marino jersey out of nowhere, and I talked about how it was really synced up. A bunch of weird things were happening to me. Like one night I was putting my daughter to bed and she was listening to the Lithium channel, and there was all these weird things that kept happening. For example, I was looking up the band Flipper because, most of the people on the internet using gematria and whatever, figuring out the patterns and trying to figure out who was going to be in the Super Bowl and whatnot, they all thought that the script was flipped, right? Because we figured it out. And I didn't think that. I think flipping the script was part of the script, and that Dolphins jersey reminded me of Flipper, the dolphin, and whatnot. And as I was researching the band Flipper, I was listening to Zachary K. Hubbard's radio show, and he said the word truth at the exact same time I was looking at one of the song titles, and I was looking up the word truth, right? And I thought, interesting. And then I looked more into it. That album came out on January 12th, and the Super Bowl this year's in Houston. Houston equals 112. And a whole bunch of other stuff kept happening that night. A lot of the stuff went back to Nirvana and whatnot. I showed the flippered shirt that Kurt Cobain wears on the In Utero album, and when you, on the inside cover or whatever, when you flip it, it looks like 9/11 and a plane gonna crash into a building and whatnot. And everything about Nirvana is 114. Kurt Cobain equals 114. Novel Selig equals 114. Dave Grohl born on January 14th. And my uncle just so happened to die on January 14th. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff in regards to 114 that connect to tie symbolism. That's how I was pretty sure that the Indians and the Cubs would be in the World Series, all because of the number 114. And my uncle just so happened to be a Cubs fan as well. And I talked about my neighbor got sick after the Cubs won too. My uncle dies, my neighbor gets sick. It's some pretty strange stuff. But anyway, in that video, as I kept researching, I started thinking it might be more and more for the Dolphins. And obviously it wasn't for the Dolphins, but if you actually listen to what I'm saying in that video, I say that possibly it is just something connected to the Dolphins that I'm supposed to see through the Dolphins. This seems to happen a whole lot. So anyway, I kind of went back and I've been just researching things. I went back and took a second look at some of the stuff that I was talking about. And it gets really, really interesting because really, in the very first video that I was talking about, one of the big things was that when the Colts and the Vikings both lost, which many people were talking about them two teams possibly being in the Super Bowl and whatnot, but when they both were eliminated and they didn't even make the playoffs, Houston they clinched the division and they won the game against the Bengals 10-12. And the only other game this season that had a score of 10-12 was the Miami Dolphins. On the first game of the season, they lost to the Seattle Seahawks. And me getting that Dan Marino jersey, and I was talking about how the Simpsons had predicted Donald Trump and whatnot, I was kind of just doing some more research, and I found out that Dan Marino was in one episode ever of The Simpsons, Season 10, Episode 12. And that episode just so happened to be the episode that aired the same day as the Falcons and the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl 33. The Simpsons episode, though, it shows that the Falcons beat the Broncos, even though the Broncos actually beat the Falcons and whatnot. So, just pretty interesting how it all connects. I talked about this big parallel between quarterbacks and whatnot. Ryan Tannehill, the starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, he wore number 17 and Dan Marino wore number 13. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Like Tannehill got hurt on the 13th game of the season. Dan Marino played for 17 seasons. On January 15th this year, it was even the 17th anniversary of his last game. I talked a whole bunch about the 72 Dolphins as well and the bullying scandal and how that was all connected. The 72 Dolphins were 17-0 and they should have won the Super Bowl 17-0, but you had Garo's gaffe and whatnot. Anyway, Dan Marino's birthday is also 10 months and 12 days before Ryan Tannehill's birthday. And I talked about Matt Moore, M is the 13th letter and whatnot. So anyway, just think about this in general. That was one of the big things I was talking about. I'll just talk about this right away because think about how this connects to the Falcons. The Falcons quarterback is Matt Ryan. And the big deal that I was talking about was the quarterback stuff with the Miami Dolphins, whose starting quarterback, his name is Ryan, and when he got hurt, they had to put in Matt, right? Matt and Ryan. And now we have the Falcons quarterback making his first Super Bowl, Matt Ryan. So I just can't believe I never put that together before. I was looking at the Falcons a tiny bit. I just honestly didn't think that they would actually be in the Super Bowl, you know. I should have looked more into it, but, you know, too late now. I went back and looked at the band Flipper then, and interesting, the very first thing that I noticed is Flipper was founded in 1979 by Ted Falcone, right? Falcon with an I at the end. How interesting is that, you know? Was that what I was supposed to see in regards to the band Flipper? They even had another founding member who they kicked out, so they don't really consider him a founding member, but his name's Ricky Williams, like the Miami Dolphin player who smoked weed, and then the Dolphins got Laramie Tunsil this year. That's when I first actually mentioned how this year might be some type of tribute to Dan Marino. 13th pick equals 166. My uncle's name equals 166. There's a whole bunch of connections. I'll re-explain it in a little bit. A whole bunch of connections to the Flintstones. The Flintstones had 166 episodes aired. But Laramie Tunsil was the 13th pick in the draft, and they posted the bong picture 13 minutes before the draft. You know, Dan Marino, number 13. Anyway, I also re-looked up the movie Flipper. Somebody in my comments had talked about the movie Flipper, and they said that the remake of Flipper in 1996 came out on May 17th. That just so happens to be Matt Ryan's birthday, which can also be written as 17/5. In most parts of the world, they write the date 17/5, a lot like 175, which is super connected to the death of my uncle, who died 175 days after his birthday. And I'll get into more of this as well as we move along, but he even died right before Highway 175, and the town that he was going to, the high school team is the Falcons even. I also mentioned a whole bunch in regards to the first and the last theme, because in the movie Oblivion, with Tom Cruise, he's working on the drone 166, which ties into my uncle, and it's foreshadowed that 2017 will be where the last Super Bowl is ever played. Doesn't necessarily say there's going to be something that happens at the Super Bowl. It just says that it's going to be the last Super Bowl. And I was talking about the first and the last and how Neil Armstrong was connected to the death of Prince because of The Simpsons that aired on 11/2. Prince died on the 112th day of the year. They killed him off with George Clooney as well. George Timothy Clooney equals 112. And then I was mentioning how he was the first guy to walk on the moon. And then after I talked about the last guy to walk on the moon, Eugene Cernan, because him and Neil Armstrong both went to Purdue University. Then a month later or so, we get the death of Eugene Cernan. So we had the first and the last reminding us of that. And I was talking about how the Packers were connected because they won Super Bowl I, and if this is going to be the last Super Bowl, maybe they were just putting the hype on the Packers to foreshadow that theme, the first and the last, and then we get the first guy and the last guy to walk on the moon die. But anyway, in regards to that, the last space shuttle that was in space was even called Atlantis. So Atlantis, Atlanta, it said it even traveled 126 million miles, which is interesting because Eugene Cernan was all about 126. He died 1 month, 26 days for his birthday. CNN said that Apollo 17 launched on 12/6, even though everywhere else it says 12/7, so 12/6. He was in Attack Squadron 126 when he was in the Navy. And Apollo 17 was connected to the Dolphins as well because that launched just before the 72 Dolphins beat the Washington Redskins in the Super Bowl and whatnot. And then they even did a tribute to Apollo 17 in the halftime or the pregame show of that Super Bowl. And that was the one where Cernan walked on the moon, the last guy to walk on the moon. Anyway, I'm going to go back to my very first post I was going to talk about in regards to this and just kind of go down because there's so much information and I don't even know how to organize it. But the death of my uncle was seriously still connected to what's going on. And the more that I examine it, it was showing me the Falcons and not the Miami Dolphins, but they were using the Miami Dolphins, And I even went back and watched this TV show called Touch. I don't know if anyone's watched it, but it's like about this autistic kid who can see the universal script or whatever, the God code. And I only watched 4 episodes, the first 3 and then the last, because I figured the first and the last maybe something to do with it. But basically every episode, this kid, he writes down a number and he can't talk. So he writes this number down. It's like how he communicates with his dad. And then his dad keeps running into events that have this number. And basically he's fixing the holes in the script or whatever. And basically what happens though, the kid writes a number down every episode. And then the next episode, so the first one is 318, which we've been seeing a whole lot. I even talked about how my uncle's birthday, 3 months and 18 days before mine. The second coming of Jesus is supposedly mentioned 318 times in the New Testament. 318 as a date is the 77th day. Christ equals 77. It's a number connected to backwards pi. Even in regards to Houston beating the Bengals to clinch their division, I talked about why the Bengals were important to the Dolphins' bullying scandal because after that game, Incognito got suspended and whatnot. But since that game, the last time that the Dolphins played the Bengals was this year then, and the Dolphins lost 7-22. If you take 7 divided by 22, you get .318. A whole bunch more to go along with it. But in this TV show, the very first episode, he starts off with 318. And then the next one's like 5082, and then the next episode's 32 something, I think. And basically, on the very last episode, you find out that every number is a sequence to the whole God sequence, and it ends with 318. So the beginning and the end are 318 of the God sequence, and the main Jewish guy, of all people, is the guy who doesn't like it. And he's crossing off the people. There's 36 people who can see this code in the world or something. And he doesn't want people to see it because he knows how it can ruin the world or whatever. So it's not exactly what I'm talking about, but it's just similar. I don't think there's only 36 people in the world who can do this. But I think that there is some type of ultimate sequence or code that possibly everybody can do it in their life. They just have to, I don't know. I don't understand how it's happening or what, but the way I figured out the World Series was because of things in my own personal life and how it connected to the media stories and whatnot. And the same thing is going on here. So I don't think that it's because of me. I think that everybody could possibly do this. And possibly that's exactly why the Freemasons and whatever else are, they don't want people to know this, and they pride themselves on being the keepers of knowledge. Possibly they just have a way better understanding of the universal code or whatever is going on, and we're all connected through interrelated events and whatnot. A lot like this show Touch. But think about it, when people start changing it, we're like, I don't know. I'm just trying to piece it together in my head. You're supposed to have free will, but to me, it truly seems like there's a script. Like, it seems like everything that I've done in my life leading up to this point was not because I wanted to do it. It just, that's how my life was planned out and mapped out. Because if you go clear back, that's when all this started too. There's no way that they made me born at a certain day and, a certain day apart from my uncle, and they made me go to the bar with my cousin who's dressed up like Fred Flintstone. There's no way that a man did that. And if they did, that means they've been manipulating my life since I was a little kid, before I even had an understanding of, gematria, numbers, just in general, to be awake and aware of trying to understand the truth of what is truly going on. So, and I guess it's not that I disagree that there are people who understand this and are using it to their advantage. That is very obvious, And the news has tons of fake stories all the time. So what is the true purpose of making something fake if there's some type of code? It just makes me wonder how all of this is truly being done. But it's completely being done, and it's very weird that my uncle dies by the numbers, and it is super synced up to all the stuff that I'm talking about. It's synced up to my life. It's synced up to media stories. It's synced up to, episodes of cartoons and whatnot. I mean, one more prime example. What's really odd is that TV show, Touch. The kid in that TV show is also the kid, he's in the movie The Darkness. And if you followed my videos for the last year or so, when I made that Prince video, they kept showing me the date of May 13th. And if you write out May 13th, it equals 166, just like my uncle's name. But this kid is like the autistic kid in that movie, and he takes the rocks at the Grand Canyon that actually belong to the Anasazi Indians, demons or whatever, and when he takes them rocks, it opens up a portal, and they're trying to come through and whatnot. It's called The Darkness. And the reason it sticks out so much is because that was a big piece into why I started thinking about the Native Americans and the area that I live, and how the town that I live in killed the last keeper of the sacred pole, the Omaha Indians. And anyway, the only two movies that I went to the theater and watched in 2016 were this movie, The Darkness, about the Native Americans and the Anasazi Indians, and we also went to Allegiant, which was the Divergent movie or whatever, the newest Divergent movie, and that movie came out on March 18th, 3/18, the big number that I've talked about a whole lot. That's even the day that Michael Jordan came out of retirement, on 3/18. He said, "I'm back." He retired in 1993. Saturn equals 93. Michael Jordan, the Bulls god. Saturn, the Bull god. Michael Jordan's dad even died on July 23rd, which is the day that my uncle was born, which was the first day of the dog days of summer. I talked about how Teen Wolf was connected to Nebraska Cornhuskers. We had the death of Sam Foltz and Mike Sadler on that same day. There's a whole lot of interrelated events, and if you can put them all together and figure out what the whole meaning is, then you can figure out, I guess, the future or whatever. You can figure out more of what is going on. And I'll come back to this post as well, because instead of the Family Guy or Simpsons being aired after the Super Bowl this year, it's going to be this TV show called 24. 24 was a huge number in last year's Super Bowl as well. Remember, there was a big X theme. X is the 24th letter. The Broncos won 24-10. X in Roman numerals is even 10. Just before that, they claimed January 24th, Zavion Dobson Day. Get this, Zavion Dobson, who wore number 24 for Fulton High School, he played for the Fulton High School. Their mascot is the Falcons. And there's a whole bunch of 24 still connected. It was connected to Super Bowl XX last year. What was it? Beyonce came out wearing the X like Michael Jackson did in 1993. Saturn equals 93. Anyway, I'm sorry for getting off topic here, but let's go back to this first post. I just talked about the coach of the Falcons who I never looked into. His name is Dan Quinn. And interesting, there's a whole lot of 9/11 symbolism that's been going on as well, with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton collapsing on 9/11, Trump winning the election on 11/9 or 9/11, depending on what country you live. He won it on the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down, the guy who wants to build the wall. But anyway, this guy is age 4. Well, he was born in the year 70, and Falcons in Gematria equals 70. And his name in Gematria equals 40, the small way, and Atlanta Falcons equal 40, the small way. We found out they were going to be in the Super Bowl on January 22nd. 122 plus 17 equals 40. Miami Dolphins equals 70, just like Falcons, just like the year Dan Quinn was born. And it's interesting because in that first video I was talking about all of the Nirvana stuff and Kurt Cobain, and I was getting shown all this stuff about my uncle and Flipper. And in that video I even talked about the tribe of Dan, who are the last judges and whatnot. Also the Daniel and the Lion's Den. There's a whole bunch of Dan references that it seemed that I was being shown. I also noticed that Dan Quinn, he was a coach at the Miami Dolphins in 2005, the year that was really big in regards to Michael Jordan and the tie. The last time there was a tie was Houston versus the Cincinnati Reds in 2005, and then the Cubs tied Pittsburgh this year, and a whole bunch of stuff. Tie equals 114. My uncle died January 14th. Talked about all the 114s a little bit ago, but it was the same day as the Hoboken train wreck that the Cubs tied. 114 people were injured. In 2005, when Houston tied, it was 114 days before the World Series began that year, and Houston was in the World Series, and they got swept by the Chicago White Sox, who hadn't won in 88 seasons. Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88. All kinds of 88 stuff in regards to the Cubs and the Cubs being cursed. My uncle got married on 8/8 of 1980. Think about that. So his 8th wedding anniversary was 8/8 of 88. And he also even went to a Cubs game on 8/8 of 2005 for his, whatever it was, his 25th wedding anniversary. 25th Super Bowl's on 2/5. This was the Dolphins' 40th season. You know, Atlanta Falcons equal 40. I even talked about Nick Saban, how he was the coach of Alabama, and how Alabama fits in with all the Nebraska Cornhusker stuff because of their coach Mike Riley, who played on the Alabama team that Nebraska won their second championship against in 1972, the 71 season. In regards to the name Ryan and Matt and Ryan, I talked about my cousin Ryan Murphy because he was the cousin of Timmy, or the brother of Timmy, my cousin, who I went to the bar with when I was dressed as Jesus and he was dressed as Fred Flintstone. That was in 2010, I think. And I talked about him, and then the very next day, we got the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting, and I didn't know he lived that close to it. He literally lives, like, right next to that airport, and it's 16 miles away from where the Miami Dolphins play. I knew that he lived in Pembroke Pines, but I didn't know that he lived that close to that airport and all that. So interesting, just the name Ryan. Ryan Tannehill's full name is Ryan Timothy Tannehill III. And, of course, I was talking about my cousins, Ryan and Timmy. Ryan, Timothy, if you write out Tannehill, it equals 95. My name equals 95. 166, that's what my uncle's name equals. If you write that out, it equals 95. Funnier yet, I went to my cousin Timmy's house on the night before my uncle's funeral because we were both pallbearers and whatnot, and we just went up and partied. And long story short, like some other friends that I have, a guy I used to make rap beats for. It's also, my uncle is also his uncle, but that's because his mom and my uncle's wife are sisters, so we're not related, but they all came up and whatever. We just kind of partied and talked and whatever. I hadn't seen him for a while. But when I first walked into my cousin's house, he was wearing my Golden State Warriors Nick Van Exel jersey that I had talked about in one of these videos. How I said I have a Nick Van Exel jersey, but I don't know where it is. Thought it was in the drawer. My cousin has it, and when I show up, he's wearing that jersey. And it's just very odd. And I said, nice jersey. And he started laughing because he knew it was mine. And he said he also has my number 8 Kobe Bryant jersey from years back. So there's no way I can even fit into him anymore. But anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there really quick. The Dolphins' other quarterback that they picked up after Tannehill got hurt was T.J. Yates. And the more I look at him, the more it makes sense. I talked about how he's the 152nd pick of the draft, and Super Bowl LI equals 152. But look at the only teams that he played for. The Houston Texans, Atlanta Falcons, Houston Texans, Miami Dolphins. So the Super Bowl's in Houston, then he plays for Miami, but they have this connection to the Atlanta Falcons as well. It even says in 2005 he returned where he played quarterback and punter for Pope High School in North Atlanta. You know? Just craziness. What throws it off is that he was born in Indianapolis, so that makes you think of the Colts and whatnot. Yates in gematria equals 70, just like Falcons, just like Miami Dolphins. So no wonder he played for them two teams. And we talked about how Matt Moore equals the same as Dallas Cowboys, and he played for the Cowboys. Can't remember, he has a connection to Miami Dolphins that same way. After my uncle died, I even mentioned this TV show, Boomerang, how I made a video or something or a blog post and I came downstairs and the TV was on because we just leave cartoons on. My girlfriend sleeps with cartoons. Her mom stayed the night that night. And I came downstairs and the Flintstones were playing. I've never seen the Flintstones on TV in my life. Like, not recently. We never turned it on purpose. I came downstairs like 4 in the morning. The Simpsons or the Flintstones are on. And I looked it up. It was episode 114. My uncle, super connected to the Flintstones. He married his wife, Betty. Somebody in my comments even pointed out that his initials are BAM. Bernard Allen Murphy, Bam Bam, right? Like the Betty and Barney's son. Anyway, episode 114. It was on channel 175, and my uncle died 175 days after his birthday. Matt Ryan is even born May 17th, 17/5, well, a lot like 175. Anyway, the Boomerang channel was part of the Turner Broadcasting System, and, you know, that's headquartered in Atlanta. That's where CNN is from. I believe I made a post in regards to CNN and talking about making America great again and Donald Trump syncing up to the Patriots, and possibly, you know how he hates CNN and hates the mainstream media, supposedly. That's part of his gimmick, you know. So possibly there's going to be something to do with that's going to be connected to the Super Bowl because CNN headquartered in Atlanta. And I mean, if you believe in the politics and everything else, then you're not awake. Just throwing that out there. I know people who, you know, they think that they're awake to what's going on, but they still believe that voting for a certain president is going to change something. There's so much more going on. I don't know how people don't understand that all of these people, it's just all a TV show. It's all just a drama. When you watch the news, it is a drama. None of the people that you get to choose from are good people. They're all bad people, part of the TV show that you get to watch called the news. Donald Trump, also 70 years old. Falcons equals 70. I talked a whole lot about the Key of David and Francis Scott Key and Colin Kaepernick not standing during the national anthem. Also, Donald Trump's birthday this year was Pope Francis's 1,189th day of being the Pope. And if you read out Donald J. Trump at Gematria equals 1,189 Jewish, just like Key of David. And there's 1,189 chapters in the King James Bible. Also, what's interesting, if you go from that day to the day of the Super Bowl, it's a span of 7 months, 22 days. Remember, 7 divided by 22, 0.318, the big number. And also, June 14th in 2016 was the 166th day of the year. Once again, syncing up to my uncle. So I wrote this in here as well about the death of the pastor Eddie Long in Atlanta, Georgia. I didn't post about it before because it was one day off of, I thought they were punking me kind of or something, you know, because this is what happens all the time. The last uncle that died before my recent uncle Barney, he died on May 12th. And this guy was born on May 12th. And then he died the day after my uncle. So I thought, interesting, you know. And he's from Atlanta, Georgia. But I just didn't post, and he's also 63, and my uncle was 63 years old. And I just didn't post it because it didn't completely sync up, so I just threw it in this post. I also noticed, if you go from the day that my uncle died, so January 14th, 2017, and you go to 3/18, a span of 63 days. He dies age 63, 63 days before 3/18 even. Pretty weird. And then he's 3 months, 18 days. His birthday is that before mine. So I have no like dress clothes, and my mom went out and bought me like some whatever they consider nice, like khakis and I don't even know, some shirt or whatever. And my dad told me I better keep that, or keep it in the closet or whatever, because my grandma's going to die next or whatever. And my grandma's been in really bad shape for 10 years, so who knows, you know. She might be kicking in 10 more years, but she has really been seeming to be seemingly going a lot downhill. Like sometimes she doesn't even know who I am and stuff. Anyway, I noticed her name in Gematria equals 63. And if you go clear back again to the Native American stuff, I talked about how my grandma is a quarter Native American, and I told my friends that, and they all made fun of me like years ago in college or whatever, because I'm like super white and whatever. I was like, well, just because, you know, I'm like 1/16, it doesn't, you know, I could still be super white, you know. And they started calling me Chief Whooping Crane Barrenby and stuff like that. But just thought it was interesting. Her name equals 63. My uncle died 63. Native American equals 63. My uncle's birthday to 3/18 is 63 days. Matt Ryan, then I said, born on 17/5. My uncle died 175 days after his birthday. I talked about the Boom Channel thing on channel 175. I did also talk about, at some point, I talked about Dan Marino's middle name being Constantine. And when I looked up, I talked about Keanu Reeves and also Dan Reeves, who was the Falcons coach when the Simpsons said that they won the Super Bowl in 1999 or whatever. And anyway, if you look up the TV show Constantine, the actor who stars as Constantine, his name is Matt Ryan even. I also, a big deal that I talked about in regards to the Packers and the 49ers and whatnot, and Geronimo Allison and the first and the last, was that the Packers were the team who played the 49ers the first game that Colin Kaepernick didn't stand during the national anthem and whatnot. But that same week was week 3 of the preseason. That same week, the Falcons played the Miami Dolphins. So interesting, you know. Even says that they lost 6-17, which is funny because I talked a lot about the number 17 in regards to Ryan Tannehill and, you know, Dan Marino and whatnot. I also did mention the story of, you know, we had the story of Alton Sterling, and then the very next day we got the shooting of Philando Castile, but we got the stories on the same day. Philando Castile got shot in Falcon Heights, Minnesota. Falcon Heights. And I remember talking about how all the street names around where he got shot, Larpenter and Fry, but all the street names around there were connected to area, like stuff that I grew up in. Like my brother lives in Underwood, Iowa. The street right next to it was Underwood Street. There's even an Iowa Avenue, and I grew up on Iowa Avenue. That's where my parents still live, is Iowa Avenue. There was like a Rose Vista Apartments or something, which I used to live right next to a Rose Vista Apartments. It was just really strange. All these, like, all the street names were connected to the area that I live. Or just things in my life, I guess. And what's funny, I never noticed before until just the other day, was that the cop's name was Geronimo Yanez. So, interesting how Geronimo syncs up yet again. I was talking about it with the Packers, but the Packers theme is obviously just connected to the Falcons in some weird way. You know, Falcon Heights. I even talked about Falcon Heights in regards to the assassination of William McKinley, the 25th president. Super Bowl's going to be on 2/5. He got assassinated in Buffalo, and it was just a few days after his vice president, Teddy Roosevelt, gave a famous speech about carrying the big stick in Falcon Heights, Minnesota. And then Obama came to Omaha, Nebraska this year, or in 2016, before his final State of the Union. The very next day, he went to Baton Rouge, where Alton Sterling was shot. At Baton Rouge, he gave his speech at McKinley High School. And then that same day, we get the story of Philando Castile, who gets shot at Falcon Heights, Minnesota, where Teddy Roosevelt gave that speech about the big stick and whatnot. And then he became the president after William McKinley died, right? And there was a lot of stuff in regards to Teddy Roosevelt, too. I talked about Jackie Robinson. His middle name's even Roosevelt because he was born, I think, 25 days after Theodore Roosevelt died even, or something like that. Don't hold that to me. There's a whole lot of stuff going on with Buffalo, too. I don't know the full meaning of how it connects, but Buffalo Bills equal 117. Muhammad Ali was born on that day, and he died on 6/3. And remember, he was the guy who lit the Olympic torch in Atlanta, which I'll get into towards the end of this video. But there's a lot of 63 going on in what I'm seeing and whatnot. But the Atlanta Braves used to also be the Boston Red Stockings. Matt Ryan went to college at Boston College. I even mentioned how the Clippers, the basketball team, the NBA team, the Clippers used to be called the Buffalo Braves. And a Clipper ship was a ship, sometimes used in slave trading. And then we got the Donald Sterling stuff a few years back or whatever. Donald Sterling being the racist. And it was right when Adam Silver became the new commissioner. Silver, Sterling. David Stern was leaving. Stern is the back of a boat. There's something really significant about Buffalo. It connects to the Native American stuff as well, Buffalo. And anyway, I started thinking about the Atlanta Braves possibly having a parallel, and even the NBA. I'll talk about in a little bit, because Kyle Korver came from Creighton, and my uncle actually died at Creighton University Hospital or whatever. But anyway, I thought of A Brave New World for whatever the reason. I was thinking of clear back when Florence Henderson died on Thanksgiving, and I was talking about how it seemed to be synced up to the Patriots because of the death of Alice Brady a few years back, and Dr. Dre. Alice Brady died, and then right around that same time, I believe it was on 6/3 even, June 3rd. I'll have to go look back and look, but I believe it was 6/3 even. We got the story of Dr. Dre. Actually, hold on. I'm going to look really quick. Alice Brady. Can't remember her real name. Sorry here. Ann B. Davis. She died on June 1st. And then on June 3rd, we got the story of Dr. Dre buying Gisele Bundchen and Tom Brady's house, the Brady Bunchen house. And Tom Brady has a ton of parallels to the Brady Bunch, but Dr. Dre equals 49. He was 49 years old, born on the 49th day of the year, and later that year, the Tom Brady and the Patriots won Super Bowl 49. But anyway, in regards to Florence Henderson dying on Turkey Day, Turkey, I was talking about the key of David, and Thanksgiving is celebrated because of the pilgrims who came to the New World, in New England. Thanksgiving this year, even the Cowboys and the Indians played each other and whatnot. So whatever, that's where I was thinking of a Brave New World, just trying to piece together an idea or a thought and whatnot. And I talked about Space Cowboy as well. So when I looked up Tom Brady, he was in one episode of The Simpsons and one episode of Family Guy. And that the Family Guy episode, Peter goes to his 25th high school reunion at James Garner High School, and he dresses like a space cowboy. And whatever, there's a movie called Space Cowboy, but whatever, I'm going to move on with that. But on the Simpsons episode, Homer gets to do the halftime show of the Super Bowl, and Ned Flanders does a whole religious thing for him because Homer doesn't know what to do the show about. And they shoot up these fireworks. They shoot up a TV, then they shoot up a cowboy hat, then they talk about the dinosaurs or shoot up a dinosaur firework. And I was talking about how I thought maybe it was for the Dallas Cowboys, but when they shoot up the firework, it literally goes up into the sky. I can find a picture of it. Well, whatever. It goes up in the sky, and it just basically shows you the stars and the cowboy hat, right? A space cowboy. So there's a space cowboy thing. And I never watched that movie until the other night, and I didn't even get to finish it because some strange stuff started happening and it wouldn't let me finish it. But in the very opening of the movie, they even say, "Recover one, this is Falcon." And the guy who says it, his name is Hawk. And think about that in regards to Atlanta. The Atlanta Falcons, the Atlanta Hawks, the basketball team. They even talk about the moon, and he sings "Fly Me to the Moon," Frank Sinatra, born on December 12th, 12/10 or 10/12, right? That I was talking about in the very beginning, Dan Marino episode of The Simpsons, season 10, episode 12. They make it a big deal about 112,000 feet before the plane crashes and whatnot. He even gets down and says 112,000 feet and I feel fine. And they mentioned 40 all throughout this movie. The big deal was these are old guys and they finally get to go to space. And it's been 40 years since they lost their opportunity or whatever. 40. They talk about getting a 40% when Tommy Lee Jones's character goes out on a date with this girl. They keep mentioning 40%. They mention 40 over and over. And remember, Atlanta Falcons equal 40. There was even some weird stuff that was going on why I couldn't watch it. Like, I tried watching it about 4 in the morning or something, and I kept falling asleep, so I just stopped it, closed my laptop, went to bed. When my girlfriend came to wake up our daughter to go to school, she said that nothing was playing, and then at 8:59, I woke up to people talking, and I was like, what is going on? My laptop was still closed and everything, and that movie had just started playing again randomly. And it was 1 hour, 9 minutes into the movie, and then 8:59 is 1 minute till 9. I don't know, it was really strange. And my girlfriend was even like, yeah, I heard it going off. I thought you woke up and just started watching a movie or something. And I was like, no. Like, I don't know. It's what woke me up. Anyway, in regards to Space Cowboy, I did not think about the Steve Miller Band. And I don't know how I didn't think about that. Some people call me the Space Cowboy. Whatever. Woo, woo. And look, that song is on the album called Brave New World. And it was released on June 16th, 16/6, a lot like 166. My uncle's name, 166, whatever. Then he says, some people call me Gangster of Love. Gangster of Love equals 166 at Gematria. And then he says, some people call me Maurice. And Maurice equals 70, just like Falcons, just like Miami Dolphins. So I just found that interesting, And then I remember a long time ago, I have a video or something in regards to the death of JFK and the what is that book? 11/22/63, the time. Anyway, the guy who wrote A Brave New World, whatever his name is, Aldous Huxley, he also died the same day as JFK. Him and C.S. Lewis, two famous authors, both died the same day as JFK. And interesting, it was also the year 63, right? Think about all the 63 that I've been talking about. I know in that video too I talked about George Bush Sr. and his New World Order speech and something to do with the Second Mile Foundation with Jerry Sandusky and whatnot. Jerry Sandusky is super connected to the Nebraska Cornhuskers and whatever. Moving on here. I also noticed that, so my uncle was a 4th degree Knights of Columbus. And randomly, I don't even know like how I found this or what, but I found out that Christopher Columbus in the story or whatever of him supposedly discovering America, right, the New World, like, he supposedly discovered it on October 12th of 1492. You know, 10/12, all of the Dan Marino stuff. My grandpa, the dad of all my uncle that I'm talking about, his birthday was 10/12. So interesting, you know. I guess I forgot to mention that I've never actually read A Brave New World, but just reading through the description, it just reminded me a lot of 1984, which is really funny because, you know, there was a news article just the other day about 1984 being on the bestsellers list again, 33 years after 1984. And there's something going on with George Orwell, because a long time ago I mentioned something to do with the name Eric. Eric is next, is what they say on the movie Castaway, when Tom Hanks is flying to Malaysia and then the airline goes missing, right? And it's on the FedEx 88 plane. Trump equals 88. But just before the plane crashes, they say, FedEx 88, Eric is next. And I've been trying to figure that out for so long. And if you look up George Orwell, you find out his real name is Eric Arthur Blair. And there's some book called Eric or Little by Little, and George Orwell hated that book because he hated his name Eric, and that's what the book that made the name Eric popular or whatever. So I don't know. There's got to be something going on with that as well, I think. I've been trying to figure it out forever, and it's starting to make more sense, you know, because of the 88 and Trump equals 88. They also just gave us the story about giving up on the search for the flight MH370. The same day that the Patriots played, too, the same day that they beat the Steelers, they were playing on Channel 3, I think, and on Channel 6, NBC, I believe it was, or it was either NBC or ABC, the movie Ted was playing. And I knew the Patriots were going to win when I saw that, because that movie is all pro-Patriots and whatever, especially in the second one that Tom Brady's even in. So I don't think it's any coincidence that they put the movie Ted. They put that on the same time the Patriots were playing to advance to the Super Bowl. And if you look up Seth MacFarlane and also Mark Wahlberg, you find out that they were both supposed to be on the Flight 11 during 9/11, and somehow they both mysteriously missed their flight and whatever, and now they're making movies together, and they supposedly didn't even know each other back then. I mean, it just doesn't seem to make that much sense, you know? And just interesting with all the 9/11 symbolism going on again. And the Patriots were the team who won the Super Bowl after 9/11. The Patriots winning after 9/11 and whatnot. I honestly think the Falcons are going to win. I'll just throw that out there. Just from all of this research that I've been doing and the things that have been connected to my own life, it really seems like it's going to be the Falcons who are going to win the Super Bowl. But we'll see, you know. We'll see. Oh, I wrote this in here too. I wrote Jimmy Carter was the 39th president. He's also the last president to go to Cuba before Obama. He wasn't the acting president, but he did go to Cuba. And remember, Obama hadn't went since John Calvin Coolidge equals 88, and it's been 88 years since he went and whatnot. And Jimmy Carter's from Georgia and whatnot. Remember, there was a story of him on the Kiss Cam in 2015. at the Atlanta Braves game. And then just like a few weeks later or a few weeks before, the guy fell off the balcony and died or whatever at the Atlanta Braves game. Jimmy Carter and George Bush are both going to be 93 years old this year, connecting to Saturn. I believe they're even 112 days apart. They were both born in 1924. I think it's 124 days apart, or 112 days. Houston equals 112. And it just seems really fitting because if you look up a lot of presidents in that era or whatever, if they both die at the age of 93, we also had Gerald Ford who died at the age of 93, and Ronald Reagan died at the age of 93. And, George Bush was just in the hospital. Jimmy Carter has cancer or whatever. So, I don't know. Just something to think about. In the Patriots game then against the Steelers, the announcer said that the Patriots will be playing their 51st ever postseason game on Super Bowl 51. And it made me look up the history of the Falcons as well. And when you look it up, you find out, well, this wasn't updated, but currently the Falcons are 9-12 going into the playoffs or whatever. Their playoff record is 9-12. That means if they win the Super Bowl, they will be 10-12 in Super Bowls. And think about all of the 10-12 stuff that I have been mentioning. I mean, to me, I think that was a dead giveaway to me. They're going to be 10-12 if they win. They'll be 9-13 if they lose. With all the 10-12 stuff that I keep getting shown, I don't know. I can't imagine why the Falcons would lose, But who knows? Maybe I'm missing something, just like before. Even the Miami Dolphins, in regards to the Falcons, the Miami Dolphins are only a team because of the Atlanta Falcons. Because the Falcons were going to join the AFL, but then they signed a contract with the NFL, and because of that, the Miami Dolphins got created in the AFL. So, once again, a parallel from the Miami Dolphins to the Atlanta Falcons. So anyway, I re-looked at my uncle before he died then. So he had cancer and all that, and he was doing radiation. And on his way home, he got in a car wreck or whatever. He called his wife when he was in the town Early, Iowa, and he wrecked somewhere in between here or whatever. And nobody really knows. He was like 5 miles off the highway on a gravel road. Everyone, I talked to family and friends and whatnot. Everyone talked about how really strange that was, but nobody's really questioning it. They just, whatever, it seems very strange that he just disappears off the highway and then wrecks his car. Nobody knows what's going on, and then he's fine, and then he goes to the hospital at Creighton, and then he dies the next day, I don't know. It's really weird. But as I was looking into it, I noticed, the next town is Otobo, Iowa, and there's no other reason to go anywhere else. There's no reason to get on a gravel road. It doesn't make that much sense. This is the main highway. So, whatever. He died between Otobo and Early, and Otobo just so happens to be on Highway 175. And remember, my uncle died 175 days after his birthday. I talked about the Boomerang channel. Talked about Matt Ryan being born on 17/5. I remembered, though, that Otobo High School joined. They used to be Otobo Arthur, and then they joined with Battle Creek, Ida Grove. And the only reason I know that is because my cousins live in Ida Grove, or Battle Creek, and they used to go here. And when they joined together, they kept Battle Creek, Ida Grove's mascot, the Falcons. So, interesting, my uncle dies just before getting to this highway that syncs up with the number for his death. And the team, the town's team is the Falcons, of all teams, It's just really weird. And notice how all of them towns are connected through that highway. These are all the teams that are made up of the Falcons on Highway 175. And also the same day that my uncle died, Battle Creek, Ida Grove, Otobo, Arthur, or whatever, they played Ridgeview in basketball, and they lost 39-50. And Ridgeview includes this town, Early, where he last called his wife and whatnot. So, just interesting that they played that same day that he wrecked and whatnot. When I was at my cousin's house the night before, too, who knows, we didn't get that in depth into it, but his girlfriend, Alicia, was talking about how she thinks that her cell phones and whatnot can hear what she says or know what she's thinking because, and she gave multiple examples, but she said one time they were talking about smart water, and then she got on her phone to get on Facebook, and the first thing that popped up was an ad for smart water, you know? And I said something about, you know, the book 1984 isn't a joke, but none of them have ever read that book. So, you know, and they didn't really know what I was talking about, but thinking about the thought police and everything else. And what's funny is this morning when I woke up, the movie, I wanted to rewatch the movie Flipper. My girlfriend woke me up because she needed money or something, and she got out my wallet, and then she set it right behind my laptop. And when I woke up, I was going to try to rewatch the movie Flipper or whatever, but I noticed my wallet was sitting behind my laptop, and when I opened up my laptop, there was an ad on my laptop of wallets. Now, how weird is that? You know, why? That is strange. That, you know, how does that happen? There's something a lot bigger going on. You know, it has to be. This type of stuff happens all the time. You talk about something and the ad pops up. I've documented it multiple times, talking about, I can't even remember what I was talking about, and then like a winter jacket with that brand name popped up when I got on the computer. And, you know, does my computer, are they listening through your computer, your TV, or what, you know? Or what's going on with it? How can it read your mind? I could see if maybe I went to a search engine and typed in, I need a new wallet or something about wallets, then it would make more sense, you know, but it doesn't make any sense if you're just talking about it and somehow it can pop up. Anyway, on that highway, if you continue down that highway, it takes you to Onawa, Iowa, and then it takes you into Nebraska, and here's the headquarters, tribal headquarters of the Omaha people that I mentioned a lot. This is where Casino Omaha is. But look what Highway 175 pretty much turns into. It ends here, and then when you keep going west, it turns into Highway 51, right? We're going to the Super Bowl 51. Just thought that was kind of interesting. Also, in regards to all of the Jesus theming, talked about a lot of the Jesus stuff. You know, movies like Zeitgeist and whatnot, I have a lot of people talking about Jesus is the same as Horus and whatnot. And who knows, whether it is or it isn't, that's not the thing. There's some people who believe this and whatnot, you know. And Horus is always depicted as having the head of a falcon. So just wanted to point that out, something to think about. I think there's something to do with the New World and the New Kingdom of Egypt. You know, he's sometimes fused with Ra, who also had the head of a falcon. I don't know a whole lot about this type of stuff. I've always wanted to do more research, and then I never do. You know, I'm sure more people know a whole lot more about it, but it just stuck out to me that, you know, Zeitgeist says Jesus is Horus, and then Horus has the head of the falcon and whatnot. And tons of people are awake because of Zeitgeist, which just, I have lots of questions about why they would make that mainstream as well, you know? It just doesn't make that much sense to me why they would let a movie like that would wake so many people up get out, unless they want people to wake up. And, you know, maybe wake up on their terms or whatever else. So I re-looked up the Simpsons again, and I looked up the Falcons and how many times they're mentioned on the Simpsons. And it says it's only Season 3, Episode 14, and then the Dan Marino one, Season 10, Episode 12. And in this episode of The Simpsons, Season 3, Episode 14, it's all about sports gambling, and Homer's really bad at it, but Lisa wants to bond with her dad, so she studies up on the history of sports and whatnot, a lot like what me and others are doing, and figuring out that there's a pattern and a scripted code and whatnot. And she figures it out and never loses and whatnot. And the first team that she picks to win is the Miami Dolphins. And then later on they say, the lowly Falcons beat Houston 17-13. Who would have thought? And they beat Houston, right? And now they're going to the Super Bowl in Houston. And they shouldn't have won that game and whatnot. Also, look at this. So this episode is episode 49, and this episode is episode 215, which means these episodes about the Falcons came out 166 episodes apart, like my uncle's name. Also, in that, when it says the Falcons beat Houston, it says they beat them 17-13, which is interesting because of all the Miami Dolphins stuff talked about with Dan Marino, Ryan Tannehill, 13 and number 17 and whatnot. Also, Miami beats the Bengals. I talked about in this episode. Talked about how the Bengals were connected to Miami. And before that, they say the Patriots beat the Broncos. And remember, the Broncos were the team who beat the Falcons in Super Bowl 33, the Dan Marino episode. The same day the Dan Marino episode aired. Also interesting, so the very first ever Family Guy, I don't know if I mentioned it in this video, it's getting long, but the very first episode of Family Guy aired the same day as that Dan Marino Simpsons episode. And look how it starts off. It aired the same day the Falcons lost the Super Bowls to the Broncos. It starts off with a Brady Bunch joke. You know, they put Peter down the snake hole or whatever, and then they put Jan in the closet with fire or something like that. What are the odds that the very first ever episode of Family Guy makes a joke about the Brady Bunch, and now we have the Brady Bunch and the Falcons in the Super Bowl? Craziness. It also says that the 166th episode of Family Guy, it says the episode The Falcon and Dough Man was on after it, that episode of The Simpsons. So the 166th episode of Family Guy, after it was The Simpsons, and it was called The Falcon and the Dough Man. And that was the one where they showed Bruce Jenner wanting to become a woman or whatever, the one that everybody uses and says that they knew that Bruce Jenner was a woman and whatnot. So just pretty interesting. It's called The Falcon right after the 166th episode of Family Guy. These two shows are really interrelated. And the Flintstones, you know, that my uncle's really connected to, was the original family cartoon or whatever on TV. It was the most watched cartoon before The Simpsons. And then think about Family Guy now. Family Guy is pretty popular. A lot of times they air on whatever it is, the Cartoon Network and whatnot, that's part of the Turner Network, you know, headquartered in Atlanta. So anyway, let's move on here. Let's go back to this post. Talking about the 24 Legacy. It's going to premiere after the Super Bowl. And there's all the 24 stuff with the X theme. But what I found interesting is this is a remake or a spin-off of the original 24 series that has Kiefer Sutherland, and Kiefer Sutherland is the dad on the TV show Touch or whatever that I talked about in the beginning. But in the original one, in day 5, the former black president gets assassinated. How interesting is that? Obama is the former black president, and on the original 24 show, the former black president gets assassinated. Remember, Obama even made January 24 the Zavion Dobson Day. Zavion, who wore number 24. I know I talked about Zavion Dobson too. There was something to do with the death of Sam Foltz and how it connected. And, you know, that was the same. Sam Foltz died on my uncle's 63rd birthday. So he dies on day 5 of the show, but that day 5 is considered season 5, episode 1. Super Bowl 51, right? The 97th overall episode. Remember, Miami Dolphins equal 97, but we're in the 97th season of the NFL. Let's talk about Touch there. I also mentioned in here I was talking about that the darkness and the Anasazi demons and whatnot. And the Super Bowl's on 2-5. Trump equals 25 in Gematria, but demons equal 25, devil equals 25, ghosts equal 25. The show is, this 24 show is also 24 legacy, and in Gematria, legacy equals 318. Interesting, you know. And then I also mentioned Kiefer Sutherland's dad is Donald Sutherland, and he's in the movie Space Cowboy, right? So, and like I said, I never got to finish watching this movie, but interesting. It mentions Falcon in the very beginning, 112. Houston equals 112. There's got to be more to the space cowboy thing that I'm talking about. I don't see it yet, you know? In that Falcon in the Dough Man episode of The Simpsons that was after the 166th episode of Family Guy, it begins with Homer singing his own version of the song called Walking on the Moon. Later in the episode even, it's about like this assassin or whatever. Can't remember the guy's name, but later on they even thank him for saving the moon on one little part and whatnot. So just interesting, all the moon stuff. You know, I don't know that much about it either, but if you look up Yahweh and whatnot, there's people that talk about how Yahweh is actually like the moon god and whatnot. So just interesting in regards to the moon symbolism. There's got to be something going on with space and Falcon and whatever. You know, what is it, the Falcon 9 rocket or something that people keep telling me about? I just don't see everything with it. I need to just think about it more and research. But there's definitely got to be something going on with that. Also in Wikipedia on 24 Legacy, it says they make sure to let us know that they're bringing back this guy, Carlos Bernard, from the original series and whatnot. And it's just interesting because his birthday, 10/12, and my uncle, remember his name was Barney. Bernard is his real name. And they even refer to this guy, his real name's Carlos Bernard whatever, but on Wikipedia, everywhere, they just refer to him as Bernard. Bernard was born on blah, blah, blah. Bernard graduated from whatever. Why? Wikipedia does this stuff all the time, almost like you're supposed to see it a certain way, you know? So, just found that interesting, the 10/12 birthday. My Uncle Barney was even named Bernard because my grandpa, who was born on 10/12, his middle name was Bernard. And my grandpa also died on December 21st, 1980, which was Kiefer Sutherland's 14th birthday. So, who has a name like that? Kiefer William Frederick Dempsey George Rufus Sutherland? That is his name. Unbelievable. That is the longest name I've ever seen in my life. So let's go on. Let's move on here. I just also thought of comic books and whatnot. It seems like a lot of times there's comic book themes that go on with the Super Bowl. I don't know that much about comics, but I found Falcon is the first mainstream African American superhero, and he's works with Captain America. And just think about that in regards to the Patriots and whatnot. His name on the show, or his human name or whatever, is Sam Wilson, and Sam Wilson is who Uncle Sam is named from, right? Samuel Wilson, the meat packer. That's who they call Uncle Sam. So, I don't know. It's just pretty interesting in regards to the Patriots. Falcons. Samuel Wilson in Gematria even equals 163, just like Make America Great Again. Uncle Sam equals 25 and 88, just like if you read out Trump. So then I thought of maybe some parallels between the NBA and whatnot. And I got pointed out that Al Horford actually went and played, he got traded to Boston or whatever this year. And then the day that he made his debut playing against his former team, Atlanta, was on January 13th, the day that my uncle got in the car wreck and whatnot, or the truck wreck. I don't even know what I wrote in here. He's from the Dominican Republic, and we just had the death of Giordano Ventura, and whatever his name was, something Marte, Andy Marte, Dominican Republic. Even the singer Falco, remember? Rock Me Amadeus, and I'm having a Mandela effect with this too. Whether people believe it or not, but I swear to you there used to be an English version of that song, and I can't find it for the life of me. I don't know, all I can find is the whatever it is, the German version or the whatever it is. Let me find it really quick. Falco, the musician, he also died in the Dominican Republic. I thought it was pretty weird. Age 40, right? Atlanta Falcons equal 40. Who knows? I didn't look that much more into it, but I don't know. It just makes me wonder. I swear there was an English version of that song, and I seriously cannot find it for the life of me. Anyway, so I found it interesting that Boston played Atlanta, right? Boston, the Patriots, Atlanta. Now they're going to be in the Super Bowl. They played it on the same day that my uncle got in the car wreck. It was a total score of 204. My uncle was born on the 204th day of the year. The date numerology of that day, 1 plus 13 plus 20 plus 17, 51. We're going to the Super Bowl, 51. It's January 13th. It can be written 13/1 or 1/13. Super Bowl equals 131. Atlanta Hawks equal 131 in Gematria. They even equal 41 the small way, just like Super Bowl the small way. I started thinking about Dwight Howard being Superman. Dwight Howard left from Houston to become an Atlanta Hawk. And what's interesting about that is on Christmas Day, my uncle gave everybody a shirt of this right here. It's a blue shirt with the Superman logo on it. It says Murphy did it. And on the back it says SU2C. I'm assuming stand up to cancer or whatever. But I guess this is like the old baseball or slow pitch softball team name of my grandpa when he, like, that's what his team name was or something, like clear back in the day. Or it's either that or it's my uncle who died, his old team name. I thought they said it was my grandpa's old team name for whatever. They used to play baseball. I don't know. Nobody does it anymore. It's like all the small towns don't really do it as much anymore. So I don't know. Just throwing it out there. We got this shirt, said Murphy did it. And I thought, interesting. It's got the Superman logo on it. Dwight Howard leaves Houston to go play for the Atlanta Hawks. He's nicknamed Superman. Possibly nothing. Just made me wonder. Murphy did it in Gematria equals 66 and 147. Let's see here. I'll talk about that again in a second. Superman equals 35, 44, and 107. Earthquake equals 44 and 107. Super Bowl equals 131, but if you write out 131, it equals 107. And I talked about all that, my uncle being a Cubs fan and whatnot, and Murphy did it equals the same thing as World Series, and then the Cubs win the World Series, and then he dies after it and whatnot. And he was synced up to the curse of the Billy Goat because, for the 88s. Well, in the curse of the Billy Goat's name was Murphy even, right? Murphy did it. Barney Murphy. It's my mom's maiden name, Murphy. Interesting, It just blows me away. I also mentioned how when I was a kid, I was always an Atlanta Braves fan. I quit watching baseball pretty much after the strike. I kind of watched it a little bit, but I never chose another team. It was always the Atlanta Braves because they were like the only team other than the Cubs that were always on, and the Cubs weren't very good or whatever. So just interesting, I guess. They were always on TBS and WGN or something like that. Also, so the Hawks traded away Kyle Korver to the Cleveland Cavaliers this year as well. And Kyle Korver was the 51st pick in the 2003 draft. Super Bowl 51, right? And I said the reason it's interesting is because he played college at Creighton. And my uncle died at the hospital at Creighton or whatever. And so I looked up Creighton to see if maybe they played a game on the day that he died or whatever. And they did. They played Truman State on that day. January 14th, the day that he died. It was even in Creighton. So Truman State equals 152, like Super Bowl LI. And also look at Creighton's schedule in regards to 24. It says down here on February 4th, they're going to play number 24, Xavier. On 2-4, they're going to play number 24, X, the 24th letter. And it will also even be Creighton's 24th game. How interesting is that? And I know this could possibly change, but still just interesting that I look at it when it says Xavier is ranked number 24. And there's still the other 24s no matter how you look at it. They're playing on 2-4. Corver, it also mentions 17s in here. Corver traded on January 7th, a lot like 1/7. And it says he made his debut 3 days later. So he was traded on 1/7 in the year 17. And then the first game he played 17 minutes. Even had a total score of 192. NFL equals 192. He was also traded 168 days after my uncle's birthday, which is interesting because Cleveland Cavaliers equal 168. I also, previously I had mentioned about Andre Rison, and in regards to the Atlanta Falcons, I talked about Lisa Left Eye Lopez and whatnot, but Andre Rison, born on March 18th, 318. How interesting, And I'm going to look more into this, but I know there's got to be something to do with like rap music and all that, or R&B and stuff like that in regards to Atlanta, because they have the R&B group 112, who I talked about had toured with Whitney Houston, and Houston equals 112, and the Super Bowl's in Houston, and whatever. Whitney Houston died age 48. Her daughter Bobby Christina equals 48 in gematria, and her husband Bobby Brown will be 48 years old on the day that Super Bowl 51 is played. But also, in regards to Lisa Left Eye Lopez, she was in the group TLC, the Atlanta-based group, and when you think of Beyonce and whatnot, Destiny's Child, they're very similar, TLC, Destiny's Child. Destiny's Child from Houston, so Houston, Atlanta. Also, I think of Ludacris and Jermaine Dupri when I think of rap music out of Atlanta. Who knows? There's possibly a whole lot more. I know there's a whole lot more, but them are the first two people I think of. And when I looked them up, Ludacris was born on 9/11, and Dupri was born on 9/23, which, they have parallels and whatnot. 9/23, a really big number last year. Whatever. I'm not going to go in and re-explain all that. Dupri is also interesting, too, because the guy who hit Matt Moore during the Steelers game, his name was Bud Dupree. And I don't know. Hopefully I'll show that in a little bit here. I know I just posted about it. And, there's something to do with all the Moores, too. Mary Tyler Moore just died. Talked about Dayton Moore, the guy who signed Giordano Ventura and also Marte. And even the governor of Minnesota, his last name was Dayton, who just collapsed or whatnot. Anyway, let's move on here. Already talked about some of this. Talked about that whole post. I talked about this a little bit too, the CNN stuff. CNN being headquartered in Atlanta and whatnot. The interesting thing about CNN too, CNN then, it launched on June 1st, 1980, which was the 153rd day of the year that year. And this year it'll be the 152nd Super Bowl. LI equals 152. But 153 is this super special number, And I just thought about it. Earlier today, the band Flipper, their logo, and this is where a lot of the stuff went back to, but their logo is the dead fish or whatever. And I talked about how the dolphins, I think, might be symbolizing the end of Pisces and going into the age of Aquarius. So the death of the fish, Pisces, the fish and whatnot. Possibly nothing, just something to think about. Struck my brain earlier or whatever. But in the Bible, Jesus has the miraculous catch of fish of 153 fish. I was even told earlier that Atlanta got burnt down in the Civil War or whatever, and it was 153 years ago. But 153 has this parallel to the number 63 that's connected to my uncle and whatnot. 63, if you write it out, equals 153. If you just write out Flintstones, it equals 63 and 153. If you write out 63, it also equals 63. Ryan Tannehill, the Dolphins quarterback, equals 153. Their wide receiver, Jarvis Landry, equals 153. Funny, too, I was filling out a credit card application for my girlfriend the other day because, whatever, we just need some money until she gets her next paycheck from her new job or whatever. But I noticed her phone number, the last four digits are 3018, a lot like 318. And her name equals the same as Super Bowl LI. It says there's 17s in Turner Broadcasting System, too. And if you watch my Chelsea Manning video, there was all kinds of 17 in that story. And I didn't even realize that Chelsea Manning was born on 17 slash, or she's going to be released 17 slash 5, 175. But, you know, whatever. All kinds of stuff. I'll put that video in the link. But the Turner Broadcasting Station originally was bought, and it was channel 17. Then on the 17th of December was when the channel launched to be a superstation, the 17th. Interesting, you know, that's Pope Francis's birthday too, December 17th. That's the day Xavion Dobson died. It's a special day, but whatever. The 17th, it was channel 17. CNN first launched at 17 military time, 1700 hours on 6/1/1980. So 17, an important number in the year 17. Earlier when I was talking about Falcon Heights and whatnot, and there's the stick symbolism because the Baton Rouge named after the red stick of the Homa people and whatnot, marking the hunting boundaries. So stick in gematria equals 17. And there's something significant about all of the royal theming and whatnot. Ted Turner is born on 11/19, which is also the same day that King Charles I was born. That's the day Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. It's the 323rd day with 42 remaining. Freemason equals 42. Lucifer equals 323. My name equals 323 too in Jewish gematria, so interesting. Turner equals 33. CNN equals 13 and 31. I talked about the 13 stuff. Dan Marino, wear number 13 and whatnot. Sorry, I'm getting tired. I've been talking forever. There's been all these blue stories too. The Fort Lauderdale shooting was all about blue. Clear back in the Alton Sterling stuff I talked about, and the Philando Castile stuff, talked about there was emphasis on the like turquoise or aqua or blue color. And then I talked about Miami Dolphins being the aqua team. Then the Fort Lauderdale shooting was like tons of blue. I made a video on that as well. But there's a story about an Amish guy who had these 12 girls in his house, and they had the blue door, and they wore the blue dresses, and whatever. Blue Lives Matter came out of, you know, whatever. That was a big thing with the Alton Sterling and Philando Castile stuff. Then we got Melania Trump wearing the blue outfit, reminding us of Jackie Kennedy. And even it's a Ralph Lauren outfit. I've talked about there's a Ralph theme that's in connection with all this. But I don't know, I've been trying to figure out the blue theme for a while, and then we got this story about Boeing unveils new blue spacesuits for the astronauts and whatnot. And I've talked about the first and the last and the space theme. In Super Bowl 48, I've talked about how Super Bowl 48 is connected to the Super Bowl this year. Super Bowl 48 was all about the planet Neptune and whatnot. Neptune, the blue planet. And I talked a lot about Shiva and Kali or whatever, and Shiva's blue. I don't even know. There's tons of stuff. I talked about even the Brendan Fraser movie that's called, I can't remember what it's called, Looney Tunes Back in Action. The whole point is about to find the blue monkey diamond because the evil people are going to turn the world into blue monkeys or something. And there's a huge thing with Michael Jordan and Space Jam in 2015 that's really carried on. Even the World Series was super connected to Michael Jordan. Blue in gematria, though, equals 13 and 40. So interesting, the 13, and then Atlanta Falcons equal 40. And I'm going to skip over that. I was just mentioned how the last supermoon before the closest one this year on Prince Charles's birthday was on January 26th, and it connects to Eugene Cernan with 126 stuff, and Apollo 17 that was, a tribute in the Miami Dolphins 72 season or whatever, the undefeated season. So this is what I was talking about in regards to Matt Moore. They had an article yesterday, the same day Mary Tyler Moore dies. We got a story about Miami not following the concussion protocol. And this is the guy who hit him, Bud Dupree. And yesterday, I saw this story too about Butch Trucks, the founding drummer of the Allman Brothers who died. It says this guy was born in Macon, Georgia. And then, of course, that's where the Allman Brothers got their big start, or their debut and whatnot, was in Macon, Georgia. Once again, a Georgia connection too. And I know I have a video, or I wrote it down or something a long time ago. There's a whole bunch of stuff and the connections to Leonard Skinner and whatnot. Free Bird was a tribute to Dwayne Allman, one of the Allman brothers who died. And he died in Macon, Georgia, I believe, in a motorcycle accident. But just think about Free Bird in regards to the Falcons. And I know I talked about Ronnie Van Zant's death. A whole bunch of stuff with that. I'm going to skip over that, because I'm going to actually do more research into this. But I noticed that this guy right here, Butch Trucks, he also died 3 months and 18 days before his birthday. So once again, the 318. And then I wrote in here something about the drive-by truckers did a tribute to Ronnie Van Zant. And when I think of drive-by truckers, I also think of Sturgill Simpson and whatever else, the Simpsons. The only reason I even know that is because there's so many people around here who love country music and whatnot and whatever. I don't know. I don't hate the drive-by truckers that much, but I don't absolutely love them. So I also noticed, in regards to 175 of my uncle, the last time that the Falcons and the Patriots played just so happened to be exactly 175 weeks ago. Also interesting, it's 12/25 for the days. Reminds me of Christmas. Who knows? The total score of that game, 30-23, was 53. Super Bowl LI equals 53. It happened on a date numerology of 51. 9 plus 29 plus 13, 51. It was also the same year as the Dolphins' bullying scandal and whatnot. I also noticed that this same week that these two teams played, Atlanta at New England, the Thursday night game was the 49ers versus the Rams. And if you go back, the 49ers and the Rams have a huge parallel to everything that I've been talking about. So I'm not going to re-explain it, but it's very interesting that the 49ers played the Rams the same day the last time New England and Atlanta played. And Miami was the Monday night game. So just interesting, these two teams, and then Miami, they played the off-day games, It also said that Matt Ryan had 421 passing yards, which is interesting in regards to Queen Elizabeth, who was born on 4/21, and Prince died on her birthday this year in 2016 and whatnot. Also, in this season, Miami and the Falcons had a bye week together. So, yet again, connecting Miami to the Falcons. I showed that the guitarist and flipper is named Ted Falcone. So earlier, people had posted in my blog comments, they had showed me this video of a story in Houston, how all these black birds are swarming. There's an eerie black bird swarming all over the place. When I looked it up, it's happened for a few years now. There's been a bunch of examples and whatnot, but it's still pretty interesting. Black birds in Houston. They even say that it looked like a scene out of Alfred Hitchcock's 1963 horror film, The Birds. So once again, the 63 black birds. Even if you look at the one from 2015, they say perhaps the majority are red-winged black birds. And the Falcons logo You know, the black bird with the red on the wings. In regards to just birds in general, it reminds me of the story we just got about this guy in Australia who died on the set, which reminds us of The Crow, right? With Brandon Lee dying on the set of The Crow. They were both 28 years old when they died. Also, in regards to flipping and flippered, whatever, you know, you say fuck you, you flip somebody off. It's flipping the bird. Who knows? I know I mentioned that in one of my original videos in regards to the Dolphins. Family Guy, it aired originally when the Falcons lost the first Super Bowl they were ever in. Family Guy has the one episode about the bird. The bird's the word. So, I don't know. I need to watch that episode, maybe do a little more research, but just makes me wonder. Also, there's the band The Byrds. They have the song Turn, Turn, Turn or whatever. And when you look up that song, you find out that the words are actually from the Bible, and they actually come from Ecclesiastes, or however you say that, 3:1-8, a lot like 318. So interesting, and it's accredited to King Solomon, and you know, Freemasons. Their lodges are like Solomon's temple and whatnot. And I know that I talked about this band at some point. I think maybe it was in the World Series videos, because Terry Francona, the coach of the Indians, remember he was flipping off the camera, and we had Trevor Bauer, who supposedly hurt his finger with his drone or whatever. There's a bunch of finger stuff. And middle finger in gematria equals 70, just like Falcons. I just started thinking about bird stuff, the birds and the bees, and, you know, reproducing. And we got the story in 2016 about the first time ever bees have been added to the endangered species list. But the bees are the male or whatever because they pollinate the flowers and whatnot. The birds lay eggs, so it's kind of like the birds are kind of like the female thing. And I've got so many comments and whatnot, but this comment right here said the falcons are female, tercels are male. And then, which fits the whole Atlantis 96, Atlanta 69 thing. Atlanta is the rising female patriarch. Atlantis was the sunken male and whatnot. So very interesting. Also, a lot of this I think goes back to Muhammad Ali then, because Muhammad Ali, he carried the Olympic torch in Atlanta in 1996, or he was the one who lit the Olympic torch. Muhammad Ali equals 96. He does this in 1996. And he also died in the Phoenix area, which reminds me of the bird yet again, the Phoenix rising. And if Atlantis is whatever, Atlanta is rising. Andre rising up. There's more to it, because I talked about the Patriots in regards to, we had a story about Charles Manson being in the hospital. And if you look up, Charles Manson has the helter-skelter theory about the blacks rising up, and then all the whites are going to hide down below and then come back and overtake them again or whatever. But he's basing that off the Beatles' White Album, and the Beatles have the song called Blackbird. And what Charles Manson believed that song was telling, he's believed that song was programming black people to rise up and overthrow the white people or whatever. But Helter Skelter was written by Paul McCartney, and Paul McCartney was in can't remember what it was. He did the halftime show at one of the Patriots Super Bowls, or the national anthem, one of them. And Mariah Carey was in the news, and she messed up on New Year's Eve or whatever. And Charles Manson, he created the Helter Skelter theory, or first mentioned it on New Year's Eve. And then we got the story of Janet Jackson. And Mariah Carey also sung the national anthem after 9/11, the year the Patriots won or whatever. You got the story about Janet Jackson. And in the Mariah Carey story, they even mentioned the messing up or whatever. And they mentioned it was just like Janet Jackson, which it doesn't make any sense why they would say that or whatever. But Janet Jackson thing happened in the Patriots Super Bowl as well. And the songs that she was singing was from the album that had 1814 in it or whatever. And she even named it that because that's the year that the national anthem was written. Think about the Colin Kaepernick stuff. I don't know if I ever made a video on it. I think I did, but if I didn't, I'll leave the blog post to it. But there was a whole bunch of stuff showing us the Patriots or whatever. I know I even said that in the post, like, it's probably for the stupid Patriots, but anyway, let's stick back to the Muhammad Ali stuff. So Muhammad Ali is the reason I think 63 is a big part of it. He died on 6/3. He even died 63 days before the Rio Olympics began or whatever. But the real Prophet Muhammad supposedly died at the age of 63. Yeah, and Muhammad Ali dies on 6/3, 63 days before the Rio Olympics. Rio equals 42. Muhammad Ali equals 42. Freemason equals 42. Muhammad Ali, the big way, equals 96. Freemason, the big way, equals 96. If you go from 6/3 to Super Bowl 51, a span of 8 months, 3 days, the word football equals 83. Just Muhammad equals 29. Football, the small way, equals 29. My uncle died at the age of 63. If you sum 1 through 63, like 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way to 63, you get 2016. It's the 2016 NFL season. 63 equals 153. Talked about all this before. I'm going to move on, though. Even the film, The Birds, then, came out in the year 63. The movie Flipper came out in the year 1963. And remember how my uncle's birthday is the same day that Sam Foltz and Mike Sadler died? They were super connected to 63. They died in Wisconsin. And when Wisconsin played Michigan State, it was 63 days after their death. Wisconsin played Nebraska 3 months, 6 days after their death. A lot like, it's the mirror of 63. Even if you write out 1 plus 2, whatever, all the way to 36, it equals 666, and 6 times 6 times 6 is 216, reminding us of 2016 or whatever, too. But anyway, when Nebraska played Wisconsin, they did it on October 29th, the day that leaves 63 days in the year. Mike Sadler and Sam Foltz's birthdays were even 63 days apart. And I know there was more. There was a bunch of 63, especially in the Wisconsin-Michigan State game. Native American equals 63. 6/3, the 154th day. Native Americans with an S equals 154. Talked a lot about Reno, Nevada as well. Reno, Nevada equals 63. Trump, remember he supposedly almost got assassinated there. Hillary Clinton collapsed on 9/11, the same day we got an airplane crash in Reno, Nevada. An airplane crash and a collapse on 9/11. We had the death of Janet Reno. Talk about Reno 911. And they also have the movie that goes to Miami, of all places. Colin Kaepernick played college in Reno, Nevada for the University of Nevada. Francis Scott Key died at the age of 63. Queen Victoria, who Elizabeth passed, ruled for 63 years. Talked about Giordano Ventura, the Kansas City Royal, dying on the same day that she died. His birthday was 6/3. His name equals 117. Muhammad Ali, born on January 17th. Parkinson's disease equals 117. Eddie Long died at age 63, the Atlanta pastor. There's something going on with 63 for sure. Super special number. So I don't know. I think I'm finally done. I don't even think it's even 2 hours. But lots of stuff that still connects to my uncle, which is just, absolutely bizarre. So, whatever, leave it at that. It's long enough. I'll try to listen to this and maybe leave some notes so you can just click on it and hear a certain part or whatever. Just feel like I forgot something, but whatever. Hopefully one of these days I'll be able to actually make a post and then make some short videos. So anyway, have a good one.